The following is a presentation of the state's narrative of the events and the accounts of Richard Wayne Collins and Simona Sandejo leading up to the murder of Muhammad Ali Vadat and post-murder events of June 15, 1978. The state's account of the events according to appeal ruling from John Henry Quinones, principal offender. On the afternoon of June 15, 1978, appellant and Robert Leal visited Simonia Sandejo at her home. Both Leal and Sandejo noticed that appellant was carrying a pistol. Appellant left the Sandejo house but soon returned in a neighborhood ice cream truck. The truck, which the appellant had hijacked, was being driven by Muhammad Ali Vadat. Appellant waved Leal and Sandejo over to the truck and told them to get in. Appellant forced Vadat to begin driving to a Houston area drive-in theater. During the drive, appellant pocketed the money in the truck, took Vadat's money, watch, and wallet, appropriated a tape player, and struck Vadat with a gun. Appellant then told Leal to drive and forced Vadat to the back of the truck. Appellant struck Vadat repeatedly during the remainder of the trip to the theater. At the theater, appellant told everyone that because he was on parole and did not want to return to jail, he would have to kill Vadat. Sandejo fled. Leal also abandoned the truck and sought leave the theater. About 30 minutes later, the appellant returned in the truck and informed Leal that he had sexually assaulted Vadat. Other witnesses overheard Vadat moaning and pleading for his life. Appellant ignored attempts by the theater staff to dissuade him from killing Vadat, accompanied by Gilbert Mendez and Richard Wayne Collins, who both followed him in another vehicle. Appellant drove the ice cream truck away from the theater. Late that evening, the abandoned ice cream truck was found by police. The next day, the body of Muhammad Ali Vadat was discovered in a wooded area outside the Houston city limits. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head. No weapon or bullets were found at the scene. Expert testimony indicated that the fatal bullet could have ranged from 25 to 38 in caliber. News of the death appeared in the newspapers. After reading the news, an acquaintance of appellant, Cristina Rosas, asked appellant about it. She testified that appellant admitted the killing, laughed about it, and stated, "You're going to see me on Channel 11 and Channel 13. John Henry Quinones. On June 17th, Richard Wayne Collins was apprehended on unrelated charges at a Houston motel. Collins gave the police a 7.65 millimeters automatic pistol, which he said did not belong to him. Other testimony identified this pistol as the one being carried by appellant on June 15th, although the witness, Robert Leal, described the pistol as being a .32 caliber automatic pistol. During questioning, Collins began giving information about the Vadat murder. On June 22, Collins agreed to wear a tape recorder in an effort to secure a taped conversation between Collins and appellant about the crime. After receiving the tape of this conversation, the police arrested appellant for capital murder. Simona Sandejo's account of the events she witnessed, accompanied by Robert Leal. My name is Simonia Sandejo, and I am a white female, 17 years of age. My date of birth is March 21st, 2061. I live at 7118 Avenue E, and I live there with my mother, my brother, and my sister. And Mr. Dean Richardson, a male who is bedridden, lives in a small house behind mine and is my mother's patient. I am employed by R.B. Little Construction Company, and I've worked for them for about 1.5 months. My phone number is... One afternoon late, I heard the bell while I was at home, and I looked out to see if it was Tony, the snow cone man, but it was the ice cream man, and he was going from right to left in front of my house. Around 5 minutes or so later, Robert Leal, who was at my house at the time, said, "Let's come outside." Then the ice cream man came back and was ringing his bell on the truck, ding, 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 and I looked and saw him coming from the other direction, and I saw someone else in there with him. And it was Johnny Quinones. I have known Johnny for a lot of years and recognized him as Johnny Quinones. He was making some weird kind of signals with his hands and said, "Come here," to Robert and me. He told me to bring his things, which were at my house, and I got them and took them to him. Then he kept motioning us to come here, and I came to the driver's side of the truck. And he said, "Go around." And he told me and Robert to get in. The driver's wheel is on the wrong side of the truck, on the right side. He said, "Get in." And I said, "What for?" He said, "We're going riding around." I told him I couldn't, that my mother would be mad, and he said, "We're not going to be gone long, not for about more than 15 minutes. So I said, "Okay," and Robert and I got in the ice cream truck. He was standing when we first got in there, and then he sat on top of the freezer, the kind you put meat in, and open at the top. He was sitting sort of behind the ice cream man, and he told us to get behind. And we walked around to the side of the ice cream freezer, on the opposite side of the ice cream man, or the left side of the truck. Robert sat on something, I think the boxes, and I sat on Robert's lap. I asked what was going on and told them I was going to get in trouble with my mother because she always knows where I am. And Johnny said, Don't worry about nothing, just get in. He talked real rough to the ice cream man and said, start the ice cream truck and get going. Then he started driving. At the stop sign at 72nd Street, Johnny told the man to take a left turn, and he said, what? And he said, take a left, goddammit. I think he said, I am, and he turned, and he went straight to Canal, and Johnny told him to take another left, and he did, on Canal. Then we were going toward a freeway on 69th Street, and before we got to the freeway, the ice cream man told Johnny we needed some gas. Johnny asked if there was any money for the box. When we got in the truck, I had seen Johnny's right hand in a popcorn sack. The first time I saw the gun in Johnny's hand was when we were by Franklin Elementary School, and I saw him holding the popcorn sack, which was torn, and I could see the gun. Sometime before we got to the freeway, Johnny told Robert to drive and had the ice cream man get in the back. He just had him sit there. Johnny asked me if I knew how to get to the drive-in movie where my brother works, and I told him yes. He said that he had business there and had to meet Gilbert Mendez there. I told Robert how to get there, to the Irvington Drive-In Theater, and we went in the back gate. When they drove in, they pulled in the back, and I got scared and jumped out of the ice cream truck. I went inside the snack bar, and they drove the ice cream truck around to the front of the snack bar. Johnny said, I have to kill him. He might go to the police. This was right before I jumped out of the truck, and I said, you're crazy, you'll have to let him go. I'm not sure of the exact words, but he said something like, I'll get caught and I'll get in trouble because I'm on parole. Johnny had told me to go look for Gilbert, and I asked my brother Daniel Sendejo, who works there where Gilbert was, and he said, why? And I told him what Johnny had done, and he told me I was going to get in trouble, and that I had better stay in the snack bar. Then later I went outside to smoke a cigarette, and Robert Leal and Christina, who lives behind Robert Leal, were there, but the ice cream truck was gone. I forgot to say that when we were going along in the ice cream truck, Johnny had reached over while the ice cream man was driving and taken his watch off his wrist and put it in his pocket. The man who runs the drive-in theater, Alfred Martinez, my brother-in-law. He can be reached at the movie. The next day, after the business with the ice cream truck, Johnny came by driving this truck-like car with this white guy and a girl, and he said something about they had got her from Westheimer, where all the gay people were, and that this guy and the girl had shot something in a needle, and that he had to drive. Johnny told me that if I told anyone, he would come back and kill my mother, and I would go to prison, and that the lesbians would beat me up, and I have been afraid to say anything before now. Tonight, I had my friend, Dean Richardson Ritchie, call the police and have them come to his house so Elle could tell what had happened. I know Johnny Quinones is John Henry Quinones, Richard Wayne Collins' account of the events. On Thursday morning, June 15th, 1978, Gilbert and I dropped Johnny off downtown. Then we went to Gilbert's house and we sat around. And Gilbert and the girl he said was his wife made some calls on the phone trying to find an apartment to move to. They were in a house, and it was in an area around 26th Street or 28th Street or something like that. Gilbert and me went and got our hair cut at some barber college, and then Gilbert drove me to get my paycheck from Sheraton Houston Hotel downtown. Gilbert went into the lobby with me, but stayed downstairs while I got my check. This was around 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. on June 15th, 1978. After I got my check, we went back over to Gilbert's house and made some phone calls and waited until my car was supposed to be ready and left about 3 p.m. We caught a cab from Gilbert's place to Ike's transmission shop, and the car wasn't ready yet. Then we went across the street to Wyatt's cafeteria and ate something, then went back to see if it was ready yet. It wasn't ready yet, so we sat around for a while. We were supposed to pick up Johnny at 7 p.m., and it was already around 5:30 p.m. I forgot to say that after we ate, we caught a yellow cab from Ike's transmission shop to the 6 and 12 drive-in at 69th and Wayside. This man named Gomez was inside and couldn't authorize cashing my paycheck, and I caught Mike, the owner's son, and he told me that he would phone Gomez and authorize cashing the check. And I waited a while, then Mike cashed my check, which was for $337.69. Then I got back in the yellow cab with Gilbert, where he had waited, and we went back to Ike's transmission, and we still had to wait. This was when we were waiting. They finally got the car ready, and this was about 6:30 p.m. or 6:45 p.m. on June 15th, 1978. I took my car out on a test drive, then we took it back, and I paid cash for my car, $214. We went looking for Johnny, to a house on 73rd Street, and nobody had seen Johnny. Then it started getting dark, and Gilbert gave me directions, and we went to the Irvington Drive-In Theater. When we got there, I pulled up to the ticket booth after I asked Gilbert. We were going in through the exit. I pulled up to the ticket booth, and when they asked how many, Gilbert told me to ask for the book, and I didn't know what he meant, and the lady in the booth looked in the car and saw Gilbert and started talking to him in Spanish, and she handed us this book, and I started to pass it to Gilbert, and Gilbert told me to sign it. There was a place for a date and a fee, but I just signed my name. Then we went in, and we parked around back behind the concession stand. Then Gilbert talked to someone and asked where Johnny was, and then I got out and walked through the concession stand to the front. I saw Johnny and a whole bunch of people ganged around this ice cream truck. It was a white ice cream van and had the driver's wheel and seat on the right side. The driver's side was toward the concession stand, and Johnny was sitting in it. Before I got to the van, this guy sitting on the rail said, "Hey man, what you want?" and started to talk some shit with me, and Johnny said, "Hey man, that's cool." Then I walked up to the door of the van. Johnny was sitting there and had some ice cream sandwiches, and I asked him for some ice cream, and he said, "I got a box of them here. They're almost melted." Then I saw this man sitting by the other door, which was closed, and he had his knees up in his face, his hands over the back of his neck, and something red over his eyes. Johnny and Gilbert were talking about the dude, and Johnny said he picked him up somewhere over by his house, and Gilbert asked him why, and he said, "I needed a ride over here." There were about 5 to 7 Mexican males standing around, watching. Then they left. Gilbert told me to bring my car around front. He said, "We're going to take this guy out and leave him somewhere." Gilbert had told me that he got a gun from inside the concession stand. Then Johnny told me to get my car, so I did. So I got in my car and brought it around and parked it in front of the van. Then I got back out and I asked Johnny, "Where are we going to take this?" Meaning the van. And he said, "Well, we know where we are going. Just get in the car and Gilbert will tell you where to go." Then Gilbert was talking to someone else and then got in my car. We drove off, and Johnny was following us, driving the van, ice cream truck, and the dude was still in the ice cream truck with him. Gilbert told me where to drive, and we turned to the right, then after a while to the left, and once we got on this road, which was very dark, and while we were on this road, Gilbert told me to pull into this store, and drive-in type store, and Gilbert got out with me and we went inside. He bought some charcoal and some lighter fluid because he said we were going to burn the truck. Johnny was waiting for us in the ice cream truck outside. Then after we bought that, we stayed on the same road and drove further, then turned right. Gilbert said that Johnny had run up over the curb on that turn, and he was real upset about it and said, "Goddamn Johnny, you're burning us." Then we went on that road for a while. Then by this U-Totem store, we made a left turn, and Johnny was behind us in the ice cream truck, and while he was in the turn, he ran out of gas. Gilbert was watching them, and when they stopped, he said, "Goddamn, Johnny must have run out of gas," and he told me to turn around, so I did. And we went back to the ice cream truck. Gilbert told me to drive up right beside the van and stop, and I did. When we stopped, Johnny had already taken the blindfold off the dude, and he told him to get in the back of my car, which is an El Camino. Johnny was sitting behind me in the back, and the other dude was sitting behind Gilbert in the back. Gilbert told me to drive down the street. Then he told me to pull in the U-Totem, and Johnny and the dude were in the back of my truck. Gilbert told me to go in and buy some matches. I bought 2 wooden boxes of matches and went back to my car. Then he told me to turn to the right. Then he told me not to turn where there were too many houses, and then had me turn on the street to the left. Then we drove down the street that was paved. Then we made this corner, and someone yelled at us. Then we turned back around real fast and went down another direction and turned down this dirt road. The road was dirt, and Gilbert told me to stop. I heard Johnny tell the dude to get out there. He said, "Get out, motherfucker," and the dude got out. I could hear the dude begging, and Johnny said, "Lay down, motherfucker, face down." He said this twice, and the dude was begging him. Then I guess the dude lay down. I was turning my car around, and I looked back in my rearview mirror, but I couldn't see anything. Then I heard one shot, and right after that, Johnny got in my car. Gilbert had yelled at him that he was taking too long. It was 10 to 15 seconds after that Johnny got in my car. Gilbert asked Johnny, "Did you kill him?" And Johnny said, "Yeah, I'm sure I killed him." Gilbert said, "How do you know you killed him?" And Johnny said, "I kicked him 3 or 4 times in the head to make sure he was dead." And Gilbert said, "I would have shot him more than once, but the fucking gun jammed." He also said, "I shot him in the head." Gilbert asked Johnny how far away he shot him from, but I couldn't tell how far it was. Then Johnny said that when I shot him, I expected him to kick or something, but he just lay there. Johnny was telling us that he had pulled the truck over somewhere on the street right after that, and he had told the dude to go down on him, and he said he told the dude to drop his pants, and that the dude started begging, and Johnny then made him do it and said that he fucked the dude and said his dick was sore because he did it dry. Then we drove to the U-Totem store where we had bought the matches and parked there. Johnny went over to the ice cream truck and was carrying the lighter fluid in his hand, and Gilbert yelled at him to hide that shit. Then he got inside the ice cream truck and started squirting the fluid around the inside and outside of the truck. Then we went and parked my car in the service station parking lot, across from the U-totem and watched Johnny. He didn't get it lit real good, and then we drove down the divided road past the ice cream truck and turned around, and Gilbert stopped and yelled at Johnny that he was taking too long, that we waited there until Johnny got out of the ice cream truck, and Johnny got in the back of my truck. Gilbert was driving then, and we went away down the road and then let Johnny get in front. I was in the middle, and I remember that Johnny was talking about the killing, but I can't remember exactly what he was saying. Then we went back to the Irvington Drive-In. When we got there, we went in the exit, the back way. I forgot to say that when Johnny had got into my truck after trying to burn the ice cream truck, he had this tape deck and put it under my seat when he got in front. I reached down and pulled it out to see what it was, and he said, "Leave that alone. It's just a tape deck," and I put it back. When we got to the drive-in, we parked behind the concession stand, and Gilbert got out and went to the concession stand, and Johnny stayed out in the car with me. Then Gilbert came back to the car and had a partial gallon of vodka and said, "Y'all don't have to worry about where you been. I've been in here working, and y'all been sitting here drinking vodka, and you signed in the book, and you've been in the office, and you've been seen, and I see you here now, closing time, so you're covered." I remember that King Kong was on the show now. Then after that, we went to the Blue Top Motel on Telephone Road in room 23. We spent the night there, and Johnny said he had gotten a couple of $100 from the dude he had killed, and the change was in something blue. Then the next morning, he said he must have miscounted because he didn't have that much money. Then we went to a halfway house in the Westheimer area to get some of Johnny's clothes because he had been kicked out. And after that, we picked up this chick and took her back to the motel for the rest of the day. We went to this car wash. I don't know where it was. Then we went to some apartment complex trying to find a number. Then I remember cruising around in my car with Johnny driving. Then Johnny went to an auto parts place on Harrisburg, somewhere around 74th Street, and he changed my headlight out. Then we ended up back at the movies. While I was at the movies, sitting in the car, and finally got out trying to find the keys to my car, and I went into the concession stand, and Gilbert walked up to me, and I asked him where Johnny was, and we went inside, in the office, and then Johnny showed this watch, a regular watch with a gold band, to the guy that was running the place. The guy said, "Let me look at that." And Johnny said, "You want to buy it, but then again, I don't think you want to buy it because you know where it came from." I think the guy Johnny was talking to has a first name of Alfred. Then we went back to the Blue Top Motel, and that night we went to room 22. I had signed in the room in my name, and Johnny had gone in with me. Sometime during Friday, June 16th, 1978, Johnny told me he had thrown the tape deck over the fence behind the motel room. I went to sleep, and when I woke up on June 17th, 1978, I was by myself. My car was gone, my wallet was gone, and my money was gone. I saw this gun on the cabinet in the bathroom. I knew that it was Johnny's gun, and it scared me. I went to the office and called the Houston Police Department and told them my car was gone, and told them about the gun, and they came out. The rest of what I have told Detective Nixon is the truth. On June 21st, 1978, I came to the detective office to meet with Detective Nixon and met with Detective Collins because she wasn't in the office. I got in the car with Detective Collins and we began driving around so I could show him where the shooting took place. While we were riding, I began recognizing some of the places I had been the night of the shooting, while Gilbert was in my car and Johnny driving the ice cream truck. I showed him 2 stores, and one of them was the one where Gilbert and I went in and bought the lighter fluid and charcoal. I remember when we bought the lighter fluid that the lighter fluid and charcoal was on the wall to the left as you enter the store. I will be able to identify the store once inside. Then, as we drove along, I showed Detective Collins where we turned off that road to the right. Then later, I showed him where the ice cream truck ran out of gas. I showed him the U-Totem store where I bought the matches. Then I showed him where the first street was when we left the U-Totem was, and we turned left. Then we went on down the road and turned again until we got to the dirt road where Johnny shot the dude. Comprehensive list of all contradictions, inconsistencies, and logical gaps. 1. Delayed reporting and concealment by key witnesses. Simonia Sendejo's 12-day silence. Simonia waited nearly 12 days until June 28 to come forward, despite witnessing significant events. This prolonged silence implies a possible attempt to hide information or avoid involvement, especially compared to Collins's immediate cooperation on June 19th. Silence of Robert Leal and other associates. Robert Leal, Simonia's brother, and various drive-in theater staff members, including Alfred Martinez, the manager, were aware of events but failed to report them. This collective silence raises serious questions about their level of involvement or their decision to conceal the crime. 2. Contradictory initial reports on victim's condition. Early reports stating no signs of violence. Initial news reports describe the body as having no signs of violence, which contradicts later accounts of a brutal execution-style killing. This inconsistency casts doubt on the accuracy of the state's narrative and suggests investigative errors or misrepresentation. Age and ethnicity misidentification. The victim was initially identified as a Mexican-American man in his mid-30 seconds, later corrected to a 26-year-old Iranian student. This discrepancy shows a lack of thoroughness in the investigation and calls into question the competency of the state's handling of evidence. 3. Simonia Sendejo's alleged threat from John Henry Quinones. Implausibility of the threat, Simonia claimed that Quinones threatened to kill her mother if she reported the crime. However, Quinones appeared to trust Simonia significantly, even treating her as a trusted cohort during the events. There is no evidence of him threatening anyone else in this way, making this claim inconsistent and unlikely. Contradiction in trust and threat. Given the level of trust Quinones seemingly placed in Simonia, it is illogical that he would suddenly turn on her and threaten her family. This claim appears contrived and could suggest Simonia was fabricating the threat to distance herself from culpability. 4. Contradictory gun visibility in Simonia's account. State's claim of early gun visibility. The state asserts that Simonia and Roberts saw the gun immediately, implying awareness of danger from the outset. Simonia's account of concealment. Simonia only noticed the gun later in the ride, when it was partially concealed in a torn popcorn bag, downplaying her initial awareness. This discrepancy suggests she may be minimizing her involvement or prior knowledge of the crime. 5. Tape deck disposal contradiction. Collins's initial statement. Collins stated that Quinones threw the stolen tape deck from Vadat's truck over a fence to dispose of evidence. Contradiction in recorded transcript. Despite knowing this fact, Collins asks Quinones in the recorded conversation about the tape deck's whereabouts, which makes little sense if he already knew. This inconsistency suggests potential manipulation of the transcript or a planted question, undermining the authenticity of the recording. 6. Absence of the bullet at the scene. No ballistic evidence. Despite claims of an execution-style shooting, no bullet was recovered from the scene. The absence of this crucial evidence weakens the state's case by eliminating a direct ballistic link to the recovered gun. Impact on credibility. Without the bullet, there is no physical proof that ties the gun to the murder, eroding the reliability of the state's ballistic evidence. 7. Caliber discrepancy in concealment of gun from defendant. Caliber mismatch. The state alleged the bullet was a specific caliber, but the recovered gun did not match this caliber, casting doubt on the weapon's relevance to the crime. Failure to present gun to defendant. The state never showed the gun to Quinones for identification, which raises questions about its significance. This lack of presentation implies uncertainty or a possible cover-up regarding the gun's origin. 8. Misrepresentation of gun retrieval and chain of custody. False claim of voluntary submission. The state claimed Collins handed over the gun as part of his confession, but records show it was retrieved from lost property, aligning with Collins's account due to his parole restrictions. Lack of chain of custody documentation. No records detail the officer who retrieved the gun on June 17, 1978, creating an evidentiary gap. This raises doubts about the state's handling and tracking of critical evidence. 9. Simonia and Roberts' passive behavior suggesting complicity. Inaction despite opportunities to report. Simonia and Robert both had opportunities to report the crime, but chose not to, suggesting they may have been complicit or felt no immediate threat. Guilt by association. Their passive response and failure to report, despite witnessing key events, suggests they were comfortable with the situation, implying a level of involvement or acceptance of the crime. 10. Richard Wayne Collins' consistent cooperation and credibility. Immediate action. Collins contacted law enforcement immediately after seeing the Houston Chronicle article, and he later agreed to wear a wire to obtain evidence, demonstrating his proactive cooperation and honesty. Contrast with Simonia and Roberts' behavior. Collins' behavior stands in stark contrast to the delayed and reluctant actions of Simonia and Robert, suggesting that he was the only party acting in good faith. 11. Contradictory stipulation of evidence document. Collins' alleged confession, a stipulation signed on October 23, 1978, states that Collins intentionally and knowingly caused the death of Muhammad Ali by shooting him with a gun. This confession contradicts the facts, as Quinones was the only identified shooter. Possible coercion or manipulation. The existence of this fourth confession, handwritten by Collins, implies coercion or fabrication, as it directly conflicts with the established narrative in Collins's consistent statements. 12. Presence of other potentially complicit individuals. Drive-in theater staff and associates, Simona's brother, Daniel Sendejo, along with Alfred Martinez, the theater manager, were aware of events but did not report them. This shared knowledge and silence suggests a possible network of complicity, as none of these individuals came forward. Absence of indictments for other involved parties, despite their clear awareness of the crime, none of these individuals were indicted or held accountable, while Collins, who acted in good faith, bore the consequences. This selective enforcement questions the fairness and completeness of the state's prosecution, logical conclusions, and preponderance of the evidence. Based on the totality of contradictions, inconsistencies, and procedural issues, the evidence strongly suggests: 1. Richard Wayne Collins' innocence. Collins' prompt cooperation, proactive evidence gathering, and consistent statements indicate his limited involvement and lack of complicity. His actions align with someone who was an unwilling witness rather than a willing participant. 2. Simonia Sendejo and Robert Leal's greater guilt. Their delayed reporting, passive responses, and potential fabrications suggest they were more involved in the crime, possibly as accessories or co-conspirators. Their reluctance to report and inconsistencies in their statements point to an attempt to cover up or minimize their roles. 3. Collins. As the only party acting in good faith, Collins took substantial personal risks by cooperating, turning over evidence, and wearing a wire, all of which ultimately secured the capital murder conviction against Quinones. The fact that he faced consequences while others involved remained uncharged highlights an unjust and selective prosecution. 4. Procedural failures and state's credibility issues. The numerous contradictions, misrepresentations, and lack of chain of custody for the gun suggest significant procedural failures. The state's reliance on inconsistent evidence and coercive tactics further weakens their credibility and indicates potential mishandling of the case. 5. Potential complicity of other witnesses. The silence of Simonia's associates, drive-in theater staff, and other individuals suggest a broader complicity. Their shared knowledge and refusal to report the crime imply collective involvement, or at least a deliberate effort to conceal information. Summary. In summary, the evidence overwhelmingly points to Richard Wayne Collins' relative innocence and highlights the selective prosecution against him despite his cooperation. Simonia Sendejo, Robert Leal, and other associates demonstrated behaviors consistent with guilt by association, choosing to remain silent and delaying their statements to avoid culpability. The state's narrative is riddled with inconsistencies, procedural flaws, and potentially coerced confessions, undermining their case's integrity and pointing to a miscarriage of justice. The following is a transcript of the newly discovered call for service from the day of June 17, 1978, corroborating the statements that Richard Wayne Collins had made to detectives. This corroborates that his statements to the detectives were true, and directly contradicts the state's narrative and assertion that they obtained the gun from Richard Wayne Collins only when he was charged and arrested for an unrelated crime. This demonstrates that the state's representation of how they obtained the gun was false, and appears to have been misrepresented for reasons that could only be defined as an effort to ensure the conviction of Richard Wayne Collins, and to avoid portraying him as a helpful witness to the state. Despite this, Richard Wayne Collins was the only helpful witness to the state's case, and the sole individual who could corroborate the link between the gun, the crime, and the murder of Muhammad Ali Vahdat. Property. 1. Böhmische Waffenfabrik AG in Prague Pistol Model 27KL 7.65, Sir 244,983 plus case, turned into property room tag number 1-245-16. Officer received call to Blue Top Motel at 4300 Telephone Road at 1 p.m. on June 17, 1978, in regards to see complainant about stolen car and assault. When arrival officer talked to above complainant, which stated that he found himself at Blue Top Motel Room 22 today, but did not know how he got to the room and does not remember anything since Thursday. Complainant then stated his 1969 El Camino Silver Texas Tag AE 1685 was now missing. Complainant told officer that he remembered an unknown male and unknown female being with him, but did not know who they were or anything about them. Also found in bathroom by complainant was the above pistol. There was no clip in pistol, and complainant did not know where it came from or who it belonged to. Officer checked at motel office, and Major stated the complainant checked in on June 16, 1978 at 2:15 p.m., and an unknown male was with him, and an unknown female was as in the truck. Complainant had paid in advance. Officer saw in complainant's room a wine bottle and 4 glasses with wine in them. Complainant told officer that last thing he remembers was taking his truck to Ike's transmission at 6,940 to be worked on. Officer contacted transmission shop, talked to the Ike illegible who stated complainant brought car in on Monday, picked it up Thursday. Only problem is, one of his employees took all keys to cars to see which key went to complainant's car and left keys in complainant's car. Ike has contacted complainant's mother about the keys and getting them back, but it was his employee that caused the problem. Officer then contacted complainant's mother by telephone to find out if her son was missing. Mrs. Collins stated that her son is in parole and that she has not seen him since Wednesday, but that is not uncommon, and that he has a drug problem. Also, his 1969 El Camino was in her driveway now, but does not know how it got there. Officer checked. On pistol found no stolen or wanted. Complainant was clear in traffic warrants and no wanted in ID. The above stated pistol was tagged in property room under above case and tag 1245-16. Complainant was given above case number in case he remembered any more information that needed to be added to report. Later, the complainant's mother advised officers that he could come how if he wanted and was not drunk. Complainant used telephone at Park Place substation to make arrangements to get home. Complainant also stated that he had a check stub of his payroll check that he cashed for $337.69, which is gone. Complainant's mother advised officers that her son has not shown up for work since Wednesday.